Welcome to the Balanced Collective, where we love to go deep, talk big, and get real. I'm your host, Danielle Boyd, and every episode is going to bring a new concept or guest to talk all about things wellness, balance, and alignment. Our purpose here is to bridge the concepts of science and spirit to bring wellness and ease into the lives of our listeners while not taking life too seriously. We like to get down and deep into our shadow while keeping things raw, fun, and real. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get to it. Well, hello there, my beautiful friends. How are you all doing this week? I mean, really, have you been able to tune into your feelings lately? I know for myself, it comes in waves. Sometimes I feel a lot more, and other times I want to just not feel and drink a glass of wine. And you know what? That's okay. We're just doing the best we can right now. And sometimes what comes up isn't what we're ready to process, and that's cool too. Right now, it's all for me just a process of cultivating awareness around what's coming up and what I do and don't feel like processing. If this whole social distancing situation has been a roller coaster of emotions for you, like it has been for me, then this episode is for you. Now more than ever is shadow work and emotional exploration of incredible importance. Victoria Hopkins is an intuitive wellness coach who focuses on shadow work and connecting to authentic self. Her story is so beautiful and vulnerable, and I think we can all learn a few things that we can apply to these uncertain times from this conversation. Victoria is currently offering some very generous work online for all those affected by the current COVID situation, and I would highly recommend visiting her website and Instagram pages to learn a little bit more about her offerings right now. All of her handles and links can be found in the show notes as well at the end of this episode. From here, I will let Victoria speak more to the power of shadow work. And while we recorded this episode before the thought of a pandemic being possible, the lessons here are all universal. And I am so very grateful for Victoria and her beautiful vulnerability and story. Thank you all so much for listening, friends. Here you are. So Victoria, hi. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm so excited to be here.
I just am very fascinated by the work you've done. This is our first conversation that we've really had, and I just knowing what you do, I'm really excited to chat a little bit more. So thank you. Before we dive into that work, I always like to ask anyone on the show just who they are outside of the work that they're doing. Who is Victoria, the person?
That I feel like this is kind of like an ever evolving thing. I feel like now getting older, it's really cool to see how comfortable it is to kind of be myself. I love reading, hanging out with friends and family is super important to me. Connecting with, just things that are interesting to me. I love traveling, and that's something I definitely want to do more of. And I think that's kind of like, those are the major things that I like to do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic things to do. I love them. Huge fan of travel as well.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I had a conversation the other day, and we were talking about how, I feel like I had a phase in my life where I really tried to not identify myself, the person, as the work I do. And yet the work I do, I feel, is like so ingrained in who I am. And so sometimes that's really hard to separate too, right? Like sometimes using our gifts and our passions and integrating them into the work that we're doing is something that's actually really powerful and really cool. So I think that that's a great opportunity to talk about the work that you're doing. Let's dive right into it. What do you do?
Well, I feel like that is also kind of evolving. Primarily my focus is shadow work, which is something that only in the last couple of years have I really kind of understood and discovered. And the shadow is it is the part of yourself that you don't necessarily like or love. I know Carl Jung talks a lot about the shadow. Typically it's stuff usually from childhood that we are kind of shamed for, we get in trouble for, like different emotions that are deemed not appropriate. Usually it's things like anger or anxiety or anything like that, that kind of show up and we react to it and then we get in trouble for it. And then as adults, we kind of don't like feeling that. And just in my experience, I dealt with anxiety basically up until the last couple years. And it was something that always brought in all of that shame and like fear and just that uncomfortable feeling and such. But I spent all of the time trying to run away from it instead of actually like looking at it. And that's kind of where the shadow work piece kind of came in, of learning to integrate that part of myself in a way that just recognizes that it's okay, and that you have to look at your whole self when it comes to healing, and you can't like ignore certain aspects of it, even if it is usually uncomfortable. I think that's why a lot of people are like, ooh, I don't know if I want to dive into that, but I've learned that it makes such a huge difference.
It's amazing. Yeah, shadow work was very new to me until about a year or two ago. And it's amazing how even just creating like an awareness of the fact that there is a shadow is like, it can send you down a whole like amazingly healing path, just creating that awareness around it and that patterning that it's developed as a result.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your strategies that you use? And obviously you've done a lot of shadow work yourself, but with your clients, what are some of your strategies that you use to begin to identify these shadow patterns and then start to heal them and reprogram them?
I think the biggest thing, it obviously varies depending on who I'm working with, of getting like, usually a person has a rough idea of what they want to work on. And so that's kind of like the starting point. So for me, my focus was anxiety. Other people, it might be anger or resentment or whatever. And from there, you can kind of see if you can get curious of that emotion and start to pay attention to what happens when you're in situations where it comes up. What are the thoughts? And it's a lot of self-inquiry. There is some sort of intuitive work that I do as well for the, like, just getting a little bit more clear of what maybe the reasoning is behind that behavior. But a lot of it is the client getting curious and learning how to kind of like follow backwards and go and see if they can kind of make sense of, oh, well, I'm doing this because of this or this. Yeah. So it's that really like self-awareness piece. So I really want to empower the people that I'm working with to have these tools, because once you know how to use them, I mean, basically it changes everything, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of navigate whatever kind of comes up in your life by having that.
It's amazing. Like the gift of giving someone a tool to, to start to do this is, I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but like, that's the thing, is like giving them the actual, I think that's the wrong analogy. I'm thinking about teaching a man to fish versus
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's that power of, because really we do have the power within ourselves. And it took me a while to realize that, I was searching for someone to fix me, but I actually needed to like not fix myself, but like actually I had the power to kind of work through what I was working through. And it's great to have someone that can support you with that. And that I think is super important, but they can't make you do the work.
Exactly. And that's just it. Like, we can't expect these people that and like in the work that I do as well, like I make it very clear, like, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to empower you with tools that you can facilitate the healing yourself. I'm here to, be the objective and to hold space for you and to give you tools and empower you with knowledge. But ultimately it boils down to self and owning that big time.
Yeah, I think, and that's just such a powerful thing once you kind of realize that. Sometimes it takes a bit to make that realization, but I feel like it just makes you that much more confident in kind of your ability to really navigate any sort of thing that happens in life, because sometimes it's a little bit bumpy. And I've found to be a huge piece in, just working with the stuff that comes up in life.
Amazing. Do you find, I mean, you talked about like anxiety for yourself personally, and other people maybe having anger, resentment, guilt, shame, all these different emotions. Do you find that there's particular like patterns of shadow that tend to pop up that relate to certain emotions? Like, do you find that people who are more anxious have certain patterns of shadow within them? Or do you find that it's different person to person? Obviously our experiences are all going to be very different, but do you find people have similar experiences and then lead to similar emotional behavioral patterns in the future?
I think it depends. Yeah, it depends on kind of what is happening. I find that there's like those usually I feel like the top 5 emotions that people struggle with, there's a lot of like shame that comes along with like anger, anxiety, depression, any of these emotions that are considered bad by, I guess, society is kind of like, they're not emotions that we want to be feeling. We're always trying to like get rid of them and not feel them. So I find that that is something that is interesting to see how many people are dealing with those emotions. But we forget that that is actually like true for humans. And I think we like, yeah, we oh, I lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay. Like,
Yeah, that we're looking at certain people and we think that, oh, they're so successful or they have all that, they don't deal with this sort of stuff. And it's not true. Like everybody is going, they're human emotions. So I think just recognizing that everybody, it might be a different like situation, but usually the kind of like the behavior is caused because of there's a fear or there's the shame. Like that's usually kind of, typically I find that's usually the root. Like there's those two are really, really powerful and they kind of can hold on you, like hold you hostage basically.
right. So they felt very scared at one point, or they felt very
Yeah.
or embarrassed over something at one point, and then that became kind of the root of it all, that encapsulated.
Yeah, I think that's usually the like the biggest pieces. Obviously, like everybody's experiences, yeah, are so different, but I find that I think humans just want to be like we want to be loved, right? And when we're not, it that having that reaction definitely can impact us, especially as kids, because we don't know how to process that information. It just gets stored in our subconscious, and we don't even know that it's there. And it can be anything. Like I know a lot of people say like trauma, but trauma can be really any sort of situation that kind of just, I think, impacts us in the future. It doesn't have to be this massive, huge, like really violent kind of experience. It could be something small and still you could be dealing with it.
Totally, totally. And I think that's like, it's nice to see people recognizing that as well, because a lot of people, and then a lot of people will maybe not acknowledge that something small happened and that it was potentially triggering. And then they become embarrassed
Yeah.
that that became their trigger. And, you know, it can become very layered as well. They have this small trauma and it's like, oh, but it was nothing. I mean, like on the grand scheme of things, it was really, really small. But ultimately, yeah, like, no, like your core beliefs and your behavior changed as a result of it. So the brain doesn't see the difference between, you know, something that's an actual violent threat or something that, you know, maybe is something relatively on the, you know, scale of things smaller. But the, you know, the biochemistry that happens in the body and the emotional process that happens in the body is the exact same, whether they're massive or relatively small. I mean, from a perspective lens, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important just to yeah, not feel bad about how you're behaving. That's something that I found really powerful with shadow work is just that it's okay to feel what I feel, and that's like it's just part of life. It's just when the behavior that kind of follows some of those emotions can get us into trouble, but the feeling itself is not a bad thing to be feeling.
Right. And I like that. So then being able to like unpack the behavior piece, where is this coming from? And then be like,
Yeah.
oh, it's okay to have felt that way and
Yeah,
to continue to feel that way. How can we change the behavior in the future so that it's for my greatest and highest good?
exactly. Definitely.
I really like that. And I really like the shadow work, and I'm very grateful that you, the light worker you are, is doing something and helping people with this, because something that we see a lot of is, you know, oh, just be grateful, or you just put on a happy face, or just all that spiritual bypassing or the proverbial bypassing. And I mean, sometimes we have to bypass just to get through our day, but then to come back and revisit it and actually open the wound and explore it and do the shadow work is so important, because a lot of the messaging that we're getting sometimes is about just bypassing. And, you know, you can put on a smile and write gratitude lists all day, but unless we actually deal with the inner stuff, it's not going to work.
Exactly. I think that's something really important. And I think that's why I was so drawn to it is that like everything has that sort of polarity, like the light and the dark. Like we've got the winter and the spring, like everything has that. So why would we not have that? Like we have to have both sides. It's just for whatever reason, we view one side as good and one side as not good. So just shifting that to being like a neutral, like all emotions are fine. there's nothing bad about them. They're just here to tell you a story. And that's the trick, is like learning to unravel what the story is.
I like that a lot, actually. Like, emotions are neutral, and thinking of it that way, because I mean, yes, like ultimately we want to have love in our life and we want to feel loved. But I mean, it's hard to say whether love is an actual emotion. Loved is feeling supported and encouraged and those things. But emotionally, yeah, if you take the charge away from anger, from joy, from fear, from shame, and just, yeah, they're your body and they're your emotions communicating to you that maybe something's unsafe or something feels really good, or it's all just a language of communication ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. And I found that super empowering to not feel so controlled by emotions, and just like understand that it's okay that they're here and they're doing their job.
Yeah. And being able to create that awareness of, oh, right now I'm feeling something. What am I feeling? And then taking that pause. Okay, like I'm feeling anger. Why am I feeling anger? And then being able to kind of like that space in time between, like trigger and reaction is so precious and so powerful. And being able to recognize that I'm feeling a certain way. Okay, why am I feeling a certain way? And then addressing that can mitigate so many future problems, but then also like allows you to dive deeper into history and past and unpacking things.
Definitely, for sure. Yeah.
What's something that you recommend to clients, or let's say you meet someone who has never even like heard of the shadow of, or the concept of shadow. What's something that, but they're interested. What's something that you would suggest to someone who's just learning to start to explore shadow? What's something that you suggest to them to just start doing?
I think the easiest thing would probably be like adding in some kind of meditation or like quiet reflection space, because getting kind of a baseline of where you are just when you're with yourself is a good way to kind of gauge how you're just feeling naturally. I like journaling. I find that can be really powerful, and you can find tons of like prompts online if you need that to kind of like get you started. Or you can just kind of write what is coming out of like whatever you're thinking, write it down, no judgment. And I think those are probably the easiest ways to kind of start tapping into the shadow, and just being like curious, aware of like what is coming up, and not beating yourself up if you react in a situation rather than pausing, because we're humans and it's not easy to always like pause and be like, whoa, wait, I need to take a breath. Sometimes we just react. I think, that curiosity, just that compassion to yourself as you kind of start it, because it's a new thing and it's kind of uncomfortable, and just being okay with that, and just kind of take it at your own pace. Like, don't kind of dive headfirst into it, because it can feel a little bit overwhelming. I find that baby steps is good. So just adding in little bits of quiet reflection can be a huge step in that direction.
Isn't it amazing how just quieting our mind and quieting the ego down makes for so much more clarity and so much more stuff to come up, and we get to know really like our true selves and our baseline. It's funny, when I first started meditating, I would sit there and I remember feeling like my chest would explode, and I was like, oh my God, is my baseline literally just like anxious? Is this why I fill my day with so much stuff? Because as soon as I quiet my mind, all I feel is anxiety. Like, it still pops up every now and then, but I feel like I've at least started to unpack that a little bit more, so that when I do meditate, I'm not just like palpitations and chest tightening.
Right. Yeah. And it's a tricky thing, especially like growing up kind of in the generation that a lot of us are in, like everything you're always on. So just sitting, like standing in the grocery store, most people don't just stand there. They'll pull out their phone. Like, it's hard to just be with yourself. And it takes practice to kind of get to that. And if you've kind of grown up in situations where you just have never either been taught that, or it was too chaotic, then you kind of get addicted. Sorry. You kind of get addicted to just being in that sort of like anxious state. Your body just gets addicted to that, like without you even realizing that's happening.
Exactly. Well, it makes me laugh that your phone started sharing there too, because that was the thought that I had too. Like, we live in a world now where it's so easy to just numb out and to, like, oh, I'm sitting and waiting for the doctor. I could be just like relaxing and tuning in, or, having a quiet moment, but I'm going to pull my phone out, or I'm going to read that magazine, or I'm going to we're constantly filling the void and quit filling that quiet time and space with something. And our phones are just so readily available to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to create that. Like, you have to intentionally create that quiet and that mindfulness. And it's a really hard thing. I've been really trying to, when I'm on my phone, be like, why am I on my phone? What am I doing right now? And yet I'll still catch myself 20 minutes down through an Instagram scroll and be like, oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah. It's super powerful and really interesting to see how easy it is to just get addicted to that. You're just constantly, it just fills you up and numbs, and then you're not even thinking. And it's super, I find that really fascinating. Like, humans are kind of strange. We're funny creatures, how we kind of get stuck in those places, I guess.
Yeah. It's so funny how we know that quieting the mind, meditating, self-reflection are all very powerful things and are for our greatest, highest good and help us to live, happier, more fulfilled lives. And yet we still neurologically, impulsively want the phone, want the have it now, want the glass of wine, whatever it is, to want to watch the TV or whatever it is, to just occupy our mind versus be with it.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I feel like there's so much that we don't even know. So
right.
Yeah.
I know. And the more we learn about the brain, the more it
it just
becomes a mystery.
Yeah, right. It blows your brain even more.
Exactly. I know. And we talked a little bit about the journaling and the prompts. Do you have any prompts that you typically will give to people when they're starting to explore this? What are your favorite 2 or 3 prompts that you would typically use yourself or give to clients?
I like I guess the top few. It varies depending on kind of what they're dealing with, but I find getting clear kind of on what emotion is coming up is really powerful. Where it is showing up in your body, and what it feels like. I think those are the top 3 that really give you an idea, just to get aware of how different emotions feel, where they might, where you might feel them. And then it's easier to kind of separate the emotion from, I guess, your identity. And then you kind of identify with, I'm feeling anxious rather than I am anxious, and just getting that sort of, because I found that languaging piece was a really surprisingly powerful tool of identifying the emotion, but not becoming the emotion.
I really like that. It's amazing how just subtleties in the way we speak can change and empower us incredibly. I really like that subtle change in language. It's huge though. It takes it away from identity. Like you said, I am not anxious, but I feel anxious.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that was really powerful, because for a while that was it had been woven so deeply into my identity that it was it's my anxiety, rather than kind of separating it of well, I feel this and that's okay. But it definitely kind of made it easier to sit with those emotions when I wasn't so entrenched and everything was kind of
feeling
all of that anxious sensation.
Right. And becoming you and taking
Yeah.
over. And
Yeah. It was definitely super overwhelming when I and then the little language shift kind of actually made a big difference, which was super interesting.
I really like that. I know that we touched on it really briefly earlier, but you mentioned using your intuition a little bit through your sessions and working with clients. How would you describe intuition, and how do you use it? How do you apply it?
I think intuition is something that I feel like everybody has it. We've just kind of been taught to shut it off. And it's about, learning how to listen to it. And for me, intuition, I'm definitely more of a feeler. So I feel the sensations in my body. I can, if I'm in a room, I can kind of pick up on the energy. Sometimes you can tell that you walk into a room and you can tell that there's been some tension. And that's kind of where my intuition is, of if something doesn't really sit well with me, the anxiety or that like uncomfortable feeling, usually in like my chest, will kind of come up. So just getting aware of, everybody has their own kind of tells. So that's where the quieting the mind kind of comes in, of like, sometimes maybe you're a little bit more visual, maybe you hear things. So that's where the biggest thing was getting quiet and just being able to kind of listen and tune in and realize that, oh, when I feel this is a tell that I'm definitely in a situation I shouldn't be in, or I'm in a situation that actually feels amazing and that I need to be doing more of. So,
and what does that feel like to you when it's a really good feeling? Like, what does that feel like in your body?
I feel like it's like positive energy. Like it's got that, like I feel grounded. I feel like it feels that, like it's a little bit scary, but it feels like a good sort of like, oh my goodness, I'm doing this. This is like really amazing. And I feel like it feels exciting. And yeah, it just feels like it's the energy in my body. It feels very, grounded, joyful, like all of those emotions that I associate with feeling good and kind of more in tune with where I want to go.
Got it. I like that a lot, actually. Having that like distinct, this is a yes or this is a no, and tuning into your body to see how that feels. It's an amazing tool to be able to, like tune in and, how's my body feeling right now? Not so great. Maybe this is not the situation for me. Or tuning in and thinking, actually, I feel really relaxed. I feel really calm, or whatever it is, because every person is unique. And then, kind of like following that and rolling with it and just really checking in, I think is really important. How do you, because I mean, like I believe that it's probably different for every single person, those sensations in the body. Like you just described, your yes or your joy is different than maybe what mine is or someone else's is. How can someone start to explore that? Like, is there a way that someone can start to tune in and just ask themselves, like, what's a yes, what's a no?
I think that even just simply asking yourself that, of like getting connected, it obviously kind of depends on like if you believe in like, do you have guides or like the spiritual like support team and all that kind of stuff. You can ask for that kind of support. You can ask for, if this is a yes, show me a yellow bird, like whatever, like sometimes you need that sort of like visual thing to see for the first couple times, and then you kind of start to notice the sensations that come with that, or just pausing when you're in different situations and getting like aware of like how you're feeling. Does this feel good, or does this feel like uncomfortable? But is it uncomfortable because it's a new experience, or is it uncomfortable because I really shouldn't be here? So it's a lot of trial and error, and I think that's an important thing to remember, is that sometimes you have to try things for a little bit just to see if it is a good fit. And then the more you do it, the easier it is to notice that sort of like yes or no quicker. I found like I had to do a lot of like trying things out for a bit, and then I'm like, no, this is not a good fit. I need to not do this anymore, or it is a good fit and I want to stick it out. So
I really like that. It's like, what an amazing tool we have in this body that we have to,
right?
to know whether something is a good fit or not. I've been playing around with it a little bit myself too, and I find that it's incredible. Like it's incredibly powerful. But one of the hardest things that I've found, and I didn't realize this until in the last year or two, but I, like you, am highly, I guess they call it clairsentient. That's the
I think so.
intuition, and the work I do is very physical. I work as a physio for my day job, more of an intuitive approach, but I would come home at the end of my day super, super like exhausted, anxious, like really just like exhausted. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was absorbing a ton of energy from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that I was just like in the wrong job. This wasn't for me. I was, like my colleagues were seeing 20 people a day and I was exhausted after seeing 8. And I was like, what's wrong with me? This isn't working. And I just realized that my energy centers were completely open and I was absorbing other people's energy, but I was thinking that there was something wrong with me and I was in the wrong job. And when I started to realize that actually, no, this energy isn't mine, it's others, that's when I started to like be able to separate it and become a much better healer in the process, or healing facilitator. But it took a long time to really be able to distinguish that. And I think a lot of people walking around with anxiety and with, other emotional things happening in their life, perhaps they don't even recognize that they're absorbing energy from other people, and they're just highly clairsentient as well. And I guess my question to you is, how did you learn, because I'm guessing you probably had a very similar experience, how did you learn to start separating your own energy from the energy that you're picking up of other people?
I think it definitely took a practice, like being super intuitive and empathic as a kid and not knowing that that was what it was. And just thinking I was weird because I was just so like sensitive and emotional. And then through some of the healing that I've done, working with a few like really cool and interesting healers, I've been able to kind of understand how to like not I guess it's protect myself, but just create that sort of like bubble. I sometimes will visualize like an energetic bubble kind of around me. I like to carry certain crystals. I find that that can be helpful. Or if it's been a particularly like intense kind of day, I find baths really cleansing, and just that like intention of like just shedding what is not mine. And just being really aware of kind of who I'm with and like what kind of energy they're giving off. And I think it's all a practice. It's a lot of trial and error, and recognizing that sometimes even like your sensations and your emotions are not even yours they're not even yours, right? So they could be from family, they could be from all kinds of different things. But it takes a little bit of time to kind of like unravel that. And I think the biggest thing is just recognizing that sometimes you don't do the protection stuff and you end up reacting and that's totally fine. It's constantly like practicing, and just eventually it becomes a lot easier to do.
Yeah. And that's just it. It is a lot of trial and error. And I still have days where I come home and I'm like, what am I doing? But ultimately, just I like the ritual of cleansing afterwards. And you working with clients too, probably do it, have maybe a little mini ritual after a client, and then a ritual kind of at the end of the day. Do you have a certain ritual between clients or afterwards, or how do you?
I think it depends on who I'm working with, but I definitely try to be intentional, usually at the end of the day, of having that like quiet space, whatever it is, even if it's just like 5 minutes where I'm just breathing, that can just be a really powerful thing. And just being aware of kind of how I'm feeling. So some days I might need to have like a 25-minute meditation just to kind of like shake things out. And other days it's totally fine. And I can just, take a couple of deep breaths and just visualize the energy kind of falling off, and then that's it. So, I think it helps just being that like very self-aware, and I understand kind of like how my body is feeling, and when it's not feeling how I want it to feel, then I can kind of dive a little bit deeper into how to support myself.
Right. It all just boils down to that self-awareness again.
Yeah. That's a huge thing. And it basically drives a lot of stuff. And once you have confidence with that, because I know everybody has the ability to do it, it's just we're not always confident in ourselves to like trust that.
Yeah. And that's just it. Fostering that idea of trust and trusting ourselves, trusting what we're feeling is huge.
Mm-hmm.
I want to pivot a little bit into something else that we briefly, we haven't talked about it on the show yet, but just in conversation previously. An area that you are focusing a lot of your work on is working with clients who've experienced grief or are experiencing grief. I'd love to hear your story, and your reasoning around working with grief is so powerful and so important to you.
For me, I think it was something that I was just sort of thrust upon it. This summer, my dad died suddenly. And it just kind of, it just threw everything that I thought I knew like completely out the window, because it was a, out of order death. It was unexpected. There was no prior health conditions, nothing. Like it was just totally out of the blue.
Wow.
And it was awful, and it sucked a lot. But I'm able now to see, like, we're 6 months out, so I can kind of step back a little bit and see how much growth has happened, but how lonely grief is. It's something that we don't talk about enough. And I feel like there's a lot of fear around death. A lot of people fear death, so that when you're kind of expressing your sadness or just wanting that support, a lot of people don't know how to meet you there because I don't know if it's your emotions are uncomfortable sometimes, or if it's their like fear of like, well, what if I say the wrong thing or that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's something that, yeah, we just need to like express grief more because everybody's going to deal with it. But
Mm-hmm.
we're afraid of it. And I think it's a powerful thing to be able to see kind of the lessons that come with that, and how it sometimes it basically forced me to deal with all kinds of emotional stuff that I never thought I didn't even know I had, because you
Right.
just sort of, you don't have those walls up anymore because you're just too exhausted to kind of like even keep them there. So I think that
Right.
was, yeah, it was a really powerful experience, and really it kind of led me to where I am now. So for that, I'm kind of grateful, and I can see that. I mean, it's not ideally what I wanted, but it was his time, and it sucks, but I know that it's going to make me kind of the person that I need to be moving forward.
I love that you're able to, like it's so tragic and it's so sad, and you've managed to, learn and use it as an opportunity for growth for yourself as well. Because I mean, like what else can we do really? It's shattering. It's absolutely shattering. What did you find was most helpful from your support team through the initial process? And I know, like, whenever I've had someone close to me who's lost someone very close to them, I find it very overwhelming, and I don't, like, I do my best to do what I think might be best for them, but I haven't been in that situation, and I thank the universe for that, because I don't know. And I know many people don't know how to approach that person who's going through this intense amount of grief. What did you find the most helpful during that time?
I think the biggest things were people that kind of would basically say that I don't know what to say. I wish I could help, or I wish I could like support you, or that, like, just being honest of
Mhm.
like that, like not knowing, like I don't want to say the wrong thing. That was a huge thing. Or just like the random like thinking about you. Like those notes were like really helpful on days when it just felt like really heavy. And early grief is definitely like its own kind of beast, because you're just, there's a lot of anger and like how can the world continue to exist when this person is like no longer a part of it. And it's a very selfish time. So understanding that sometimes your friend might not be in the best state, and if they're angry, it's not you, like you're not the reason. So just kind of meeting them and just kind of acknowledging that it's okay that they feel the way they feel, and that you don't have to fix it. You can't fix it. And there's nothing that you could do that really would make it better. And I think, yeah, just that sort of like ask them if it's okay if you talk, like if you know they're the person that died, if it's okay if you like share stories with them. I found that really powerful.
Mm.
Some people ask like, can I, like, I had this story about your dad, can I tell you about it, and that sort of stuff, because people don't like to say their name, and that's something that kind of, that sucks a lot, is that they don't ask you about them anymore, or like any of that sort of stuff, which I found, yeah, it's kind of sad because you want to talk about them, but at the same time, I feel like if I talk about them, it kind of shuts down a conversation really quickly.
Right. And yeah, I guess a lot of people are probably afraid or have fear of triggering a negative emotion for you.
Yeah.
When in fact, it's probably very joyous to be able to share a story, or share an experience, or, and maybe it's not the right time. And I love the idea of saying, can I share a story, or asking permission or consent to have that conversation or that dialogue. I think that's a really beautiful thing. Um, Thank you for sharing that. That's so powerful.
Yeah, I think it's something, it's important, and I feel like I'm glad that I'm finding ways to kind of express that. At least for me, I kind of need to get it out of my body, and then that way it's much easier to kind of process those emotions um, when they're not like stuck in me. And I know that when you just let them sit, you end up sick and just not good. It's not a good situation to like stuff down the emotions. So being able to feel them has been quite powerful, and also very uncomfortable, and a bit of a mess, but it's been good. Like there's been that release, which is really, really powerful.
I love that. I mean, and that's just it. Like when these earth shattering things happen, it's probably one of the worst times to not feel it, to bypass it, or to, like, oh, just think about the memories, or think about the, the beautiful things that happened. Like, no, it's okay to feel like crap. It's okay to have these like emotional outbursts. It's okay to be angry and resentful and whatever emotion comes up. It's okay, because this is not this is a terrible thing. This is shattering. And quite importantly, it's important to actually experience those emotions during that, especially that really, really acute grief initially, because otherwise they're just going to get bottled up and, like you said, make you sick and make you feel terrible.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's obviously everybody's experience is kind of unique, but I think there is that element of not necessarily feeling the support from kind of like our society when it comes to death. Of it's very like, after you hit a certain amount of time, you should be done, or what stage are you at the grief? Like, but it's not really like, it's not a linear kind of thing. It's just like this big circle that kind of like you're always back and forth, and it can be 4 years, and then suddenly something happens, and just it brings up that memory. So I think just like it's not something that you ever get over. You just kind of learn to move with it, like it grows as you grow, kind of thing.
Exactly. And it becomes a part of you, and that's okay. It's part of your story. And ultimately, if we can learn from it and help others, navigate their journey, then hey, we're doing something with it.
Exactly. And just not feel so alone. I think that's the biggest thing, of like it is so lonely. So if speaking about it makes someone be like, oh wow, I feel that, and I'm not the only one who's feeling that, it's a huge, like, that connection piece is so powerful.
Wow. And do you think that your experience has helped you, or has had other clients be drawn to you and to be working with you? Do you work with clients who are going through grief or loss or anything like that right now?
There's been a couple that have had that sort of like experience. And I think it's definitely, even just having that connection with the community that I'm working on kind of creating, of being able to, like, they'll share a story about their loved one that's kind of passed away, or like just to have that space where they feel kind of safe to share is really kind of a powerful thing. And yeah, just to know that they're not alone, and it's okay to feel whatever it is coming up for them. And I find that, social media has been a really powerful tool for that. I've been quite surprised of the connections that have been made through just by writing, sharing my story, and then other people are sharing theirs, and to have that connection. Because really only if you've been through it, like every death is different. I find that's also something I found, is that every relationship that you lose is a different kind of grief as well. So being mindful that, a grandparent is different than a child, than a parent, like it's all going to feel different. And it's not a one size fits all kind of thing, which is kind of how we like to deal with it. It's a very unique experience.
And it depends on the relationship that person had with the person who passed away as well too, because there might be, there might be unresolved stuff, or there might be, like it all kind of depends on that relationship. And that's, oftentimes there's guilt, or there's so many emotions that are layered within the context of that acute grief, or that, long-term grief that continues to pop up in and out of life as we move forward.
Definitely. So it's definitely been an eye-opening experience. That's for sure.
Wow. That was powerful. Thank you. I'm excited for people to actually hear this. And I myself am grateful too, because it's empowering me with tools to, to help others, or to at least know what maybe would be helpful or supportive, I guess is probably a better way to express it, to be supportive to others too. And it's a tough thing to navigate. And thank you. I'm grateful that you've shared your experience. That's fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm super glad to be able to share.
Yeah, it's important. It's really important, because like you said, it's something that we will all navigate at some point in life. And so having tools and having the dialogue around it is so important. So now you obviously are very entrepreneurial, and working for yourself and working with clients is a very tough thing. And like we talked about, like identity being tied to work sometimes. How do you navigate maintaining your own inner wellness while working as an entrepreneur? Because it's really it's really easy to let work and the business take over our life. How do you set up your boundaries and maintain your own inner wellness while running your own business?
I feel like that's a work in progress.
Always
It's a
is.
balance, right? I like to create, like, I have a morning ritual that I find that I'm really trying to get consistent with. And that's been quite helpful, of like meditation, journaling, having that quiet to kind of set my day up.
Yeah.
And trying to create a space where I have like a designated office. Again, that's kind of like a work in progress of like, this is where I'm working, not all over the house. Because then everything, yeah, it just has that weird energy of like everywhere feels like work then, rather than having like a specific space where this is where I do my work. And yeah, just learning the balance of when is the time to be working. Sometimes I do. Obviously, I have a family, so I'm working sometimes in the evenings, just with kind of like how the scheduling works. But being mindful of the time that I'm putting in is also really important. I think I'm almost having a family basically forces me to not be able to, like, I can't work so much because obviously the kids will be like, we're hungry, like you have to feed us. So that is it makes it a little bit easier not to be so entrenched in work all the time.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I mean, having a family can be all encompassing on its own. So it's kind of a natural like container within itself that like you can't let it overflow into your life because there's little people who need their mom.
Yeah, definitely. And they will tell me when
Exactly.
they need me, right?
Oh, kids are so good at telling you exactly what they need, right?
Yeah.
What have some of your biggest challenges been in running your business?
I think being able to stay focused, and not letting the like other things take away from what I'm trying to create. I don't know if it's like a mom thing or maybe my personality or like a woman thing of just like being able to put myself last is a really easy thing.
Yeah.
So being aware of that, no, this is an important thing. It If I have to leave the laundry, it will be fine. And that's constantly like that practice of like, no, this is important and I have to focus on this.
Right. So
Yeah,
creating priorities and
yeah,
getting clarity around what's important and what's not today.
exactly. Of like creating like a schedule, that's been really helpful of like, this is the time that I'm working. And that's my focus right now.
Right. And so to flip that on its head, what's been one of the biggest wins for you in having your own business?
I think just being able to have that, well, the flexibility is a big thing. And I've tried to work traditional jobs and I've never thrived in them. It's been really uncomfortable for me. So this feels good to have my own, like being able to create my own rules and like do my own creative thing. It feels so good. And it's that I think is the biggest win of like finally listening to what my body's been telling me for all of these years. Like, this is what you need to be doing. So
Right.
yeah.
And it's so funny how we just like, we ignore that for so long. And then finally we get a taste of it. And we're like, oh, this is what it feels to actually like be in alignment.
Right. Yeah. It just took a bit. So I'm stubborn sometimes. So I think sometimes it needs to take a bit for me to finally like, oh, okay, yes, you have to do this.
Yeah, I love it. What you mentioned that you love to read. What are some of your favorite like books that you would recommend to anyone looking to get into either shadow work or start their own business or anything like that? What are some of your favorite resources, like podcast, books? Obviously free books are a big part of your life. What would you recommend anyone start reading if they want to get into shadow work, entrepreneurialism, or spiritualism or anything else? What's kind of your favorite there?
I think the books I found that were really cool and helpful, I like Rebecca Campbell's books, Rise, Sister Rise, and Light is the New Black, because she has a lot of journal prompts in it. So I found that it was really kind of a powerful way to start the conversation of like, you'd have a chapter and then she'd have prompts for you to kind of like reflect on after. And it was just, it felt like a very empowering experience. And I found, yeah, that was a really profound like way to sort of dip my toes into like actually waking myself up and in the spiritual, like I've always been connected to it, but just actually acknowledging that it was there. Just trying to think of the other, I don't read a lot of business related books. I'm currently reading one called The Waking of the Witch, which is quite interesting. The author is Pam. I can't remember her last name, but I know she has a podcast as well.
Okay. Waking of the Witch.
Yeah, The Waking of the Witch. And then the podcast I've been listening to lately is called Spiritually Intimate. And it's these two female business owners, but they talk a lot about shadow work, different, like how you get stuck and blocked, and just it's really empowering conversations I found. And obviously they own businesses, so there is that sort of business element kind of mixed in with it. I find it quite powerful. But I think those are kind of the main things that I've been listening to lately.
I love that. That's awesome. I'll link all those in the show notes as well. So if anyone wants to track them down, we can have links to them, and we'll find the author of the book that you mentioned as well.
Perfect.
Before I ask you the last question, how can people get a hold of you? How can people find you online? And do you have any specials or anything right now? Like, how can people work with you?
Right now, Instagram is usually it's like the base camp. So it's at Victoria_intuitive wellness. From there, there's all of the links for like my website, the free offer that I have, just like a little mini journaling book. I do have a program right now that's 4 weeks, 1-to-1, and it's quite in depth. You get 4 60-minute sessions with me, working through kind of like shadow work. It's sort of like a crash course basically in shadow work. There's homework, pretty intense workbook that I will send off to you, and it's on for $195 Canadian for now. It will probably be going up in April, just as I'm doing another course. So my learning obviously will be a little bit more intensive at that point, but I am happy to kind of work with any people's budget, because I know that can sometimes be a barrier, and I want to be aware of kind of that piece as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you. What are you going to be studying?
It's a quantum healing and like psychic development course.
Wow.
So yeah, it sounds really, really powerful, but there is that element of sort of like trauma informed healing and that sort of thing. So just kind of taking things to a deeper level, which is sounds really powerful and kind of just where I need to be at the moment.
Exactly. Oh man, I can't wait. I will have to touch base after you do the course, because I would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, the last question that I ask, and I ask this question to everyone, so I'll fire it off at you. What is your definition of balance?
I think balance is just being, like in tune. Like when I'm feeling kind of grounded, everything feels not easy, but like it's easeful. It doesn't feel forced. So of that sort of like, sometimes it just ever evolves, and just like tuning into that sort of, what do I need at this moment, and kind of honoring where you're at. Those I think were the biggest pieces of like, if I'm tired, it's okay if I need to rest. If I have more energy, then I can kind of do whatever it is that feels good at that moment. So just that honoring where I am with no pressure, and not feeling guilty for whatever it is that I need at that moment.
I think that's really huge, is allowing yourself to feel those things and acknowledging them and giving yourself what you need without the guilt or the shame around it. That's really huge. Mm-hmm. Victoria, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I can't wait for everyone to hear it. So Much gratitude to you. And I will be linking to all your website, your Instagram, and everything on the show notes as well, so people will be able to find you. Yeah, thank you so much. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah, it was super fun. I really enjoy doing these things, and it's a good way to kind of push myself out of my comfort zone too. So
Awesome.
I love it.
Win-win for everyone.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this episode as expansive as I did. If you enjoyed listening, please like, subscribe, and review. It means so much to us. If you would like to learn more about The Balanced Collective and our offerings, please visit www.thebalancedcollective.com or hit us up on Instagram @thebalancedcollective. Thank you so much, and please keep spreading your light.